the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
A little wonky, so don't even give that a second thought.
Well, how different is Todd Fritz now versus when he started working with Dan 25 years ago?
That's a great question. I'm not mature isn't the word, but when I was first starting out and I got an opportunity to book guests, I was not that I'm not a pest now to the agents and the PR directors of teams trying to get guests, but I am a lot more diligent and smart about how I deal with the different personalities. There are certain PR directors or agents you can kind of kibitz with and have a little fun with. Others are very straight-laced and serious. They're all business. And I was trying so hard to prove myself at WFAN when I was starting in New York while I was at NYU, and then I had a sports radio job in LA, that I probably was a little too pushy and a little too impatient for people to get back to me on certain guests that I was pursuing. And I had a couple little slaps on the wrist by various executive producers and program directors, trying to let me know that, it's great to go through walls and try to get that big get or whatever you're trying to do with that big guest that all the other shows are going after. But you also have to give people on the other side of the phone some time and space to do their part. And just because they don't get back to you in 15 minutes doesn't mean you're not doing your job or they're not doing theirs. So that was one main thing I've learned a lot about, that, just be patient and just which you're not going to learn in any school, in any classroom or in college or anything like that. Some of these things about, developing a Rolodex and making contacts and how to handle people in different situations are just, a lot of it was just on the fly stuff dating back to the early 90s in the basement of Astoria, Queens at WFAN. So I'm proud of what I've done and, and how far I've come and what I've accomplished. But that would be one thing that would stand out about how kind of let things play out a little bit. And, everything has a way of working out. You're not going to always get that big guest. You're not going to always hear back from somebody right away that you're pursuing. And unless you have their direct number, and much more often than not, you're relying on other people. And it's important to, be very cognizant of that. And you want your name associated with positive things. You don't want to be too much of a pain in the neck. They know that you're just trying to do your job and you're trying to get the right people on the show. But there's also, sometimes you got to, step back and go, what, if it happens, great. If not, let's go after B, C, D, or E on our list of who we want to have on the show, and not be too much of a pain in the neck where, Fritzy's calling again. Oh, I can't stand this guy with the emails and the text. So I try to be careful with that, because I always picture myself, if I'm in a room with a bunch of people, everyone wants to be liked and thought of in a high regard. You never want to be that person as soon as you walk out of the room, everyone kind of rolls their eyes and whispers about you and says, "Oh, Fritzy, man, that guy's got to chill a little bit," or something like that. So I always put that in mind as I'm typing an email or following up with someone about a guest request and I hadn't heard back in a certain time frame. But that stood out to me over these, past many years in the business of, just giving people some more breathing room with doing their part than what I'm trying to do on my end.
Well, we're one of the same. And I think one of the more challenging things for radio versus podcast booking, because I reached out to you, and I always feel weird when I reach out. Now, when I do the follow-up, how much time do I do that? And with my script, and to reach out to folks, and you got to be efficient in the way you do it, and present value and where you're at, and like why it's worth your time, and here's who I've had thus far, and here's why this will be. And it's weird. You just have to put yourself out there over and over again, because I think people just assume when you do podcasts and you just jump right on and there you go. No, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, pre and after.
And you got to appreciate, you hope the person on the other end appreciates the assertiveness and that, you're a go-getter, and you try to find that line between, wow, he's really, trying to make something of himself and trying to, move his podcast along and be a player in the business. But you don't want to go too far afield where where your name is associated with negative things or pest or, some of those things. And there's no formula for that. You just get a feel for that over time. And to this day, I've been in situations where, I may have stepped on toes a little bit, or I sent one too many emails or made one too many requests. And, you learn from those things. But again, it's not something you're going to learn in a textbook or in a classroom or in a lab. It's all personality traits and dealing with other people. And, again, it's great what you're doing. And, you want to stand out. You want to get big guests, and you want to, be accomplished and be, again, for lack of a better word, a player in the business, in the industry. What sets you apart from other podcasts or other shows or what we do? There's a lot of competition in the sports radio and TV market. But, I'd like to think what we do, without looking over our shoulder and worrying about what everyone else is doing, if we just do the best that we know we can do each day, it'll be a great show. And I think by the time noon Eastern time hits, we can all kind of smile and feel like that was we did what we set out to do.
I love it. which of the Danettes is most different off air versus what fans see on air?
Wow, they're all very similar. That's a really good question. Which one of I would say,
And it could be you.
yeah, actually, it might be me. I'm glad you gave me that as an out, because no one's, and again, it's not an act or anything like that, but I can be, I'm a man of many moods, and like that Billy Joel song, I go to extremes. If you catch me in the right mood, especially if I have my guest booked and I'm, not all stressed out about things like that, and whether it's limericks or sports names or doing impersonations or whatever, and I have that kind of shtick with my wife and kids and family and friends and stuff like that. But there are also times where, especially after a 3-hour show, I'll come down from that high and just, and then I could be very quiet. So on days where you maybe see me, like when they call it Friday Fritzy, when I'm in one of those kind of extra wacky moods and the weekend's coming up and we're all a little more silly than we normally are. And I know I don't have to worry about guests for a couple of days and all that. And, so I might be a little more, off the wall a little bit, but I talk fast. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm a little hyper. I don't drink coffee or take any kind of thing that I am what you see here. And that's really what it is. But there are, as silly as and wacky as they may be at certain times on the show, as soon as the show's over, and again, not that it's an act, we're in the middle of the show and we're entertaining, we're having fun, as I'm calming down from, especially if we had a really good show, I'm ready to go, have my Traeger grill, my little meat Friday lunch and decompress and quiet. So if you were watching the show on a certain day and then you saw me a couple hours later, like maybe dozing up on the couch back at home with my phone, periodically still working on guests for the next day, it may be somewhat different than what you just saw or heard on the radio or saw on Peacock. So I'm glad you gave me that out, because Marvin and Paulie and Steven and Dan, they're all very, very similar on and off the air. And I'm pretty similar too. But again, there have been times where, as wacky as I might be, and I love making people laugh and being silly and stuff, but I could also be, have that serious quiet side where I just want to kind of take a break and shut it all down.
What happens when you're in the pre-meetings, like pre-show meetings, and the everything bagel story comes up? Is that something where it just, it's on the fly, or is that like you just say haphazardly and then Dan's like, okay, no, jot that, this is coming up? Because that's one of my favorites over the years.
It's very on the it's very on the fly. He's always, content is king, and you always, if you have a funny story or something happened to one of us, not that everyone is so interested in our life story, it's more about Dan and the interviews and the subject matter of what happened in the world of sports since the last time we were on the air. But if I just happen to, and sometimes I throw it out there and I'm not looking for attention or this would be a good segment for the show, Dan is very bright and Paulie's really good at recognizing, what, that's great that you shared that story, but like save that for the air, or can you elaborate on that? Because that's something people would have fun with. They kind of like to know what we're doing behind the scenes a little bit, and that's fun stuff. Once we're done breaking down the Super Bowl or 110, $98 or whatever it is, or 4-2 Cubs, there's other things going on, and thankfully, which is great, people feel a closeness with us, and they feel like they're part of our group, and they feel like they know us, and that they would hang out with us like in their house or at a barbecue or at a sports bar. And there's no better compliment than that, to feel that comfortable with us, where they feel like we're all kind of buddies, whether they call in or send a note on social media. And I'm sure you've heard that a number of times. People have called sharing all kinds of stories that they went through a tough time in their life, or someone passed away, God forbid, or they had an injury or an illness, and we helped brighten their day. And how awesome is that? There's very few jobs in the world that afford that opportunity to do something like that. So we laugh, we have fun with it. One of us may bring up a story, and then all of a sudden Paul or Dan or anybody can just say, we should talk about that, because people can relate to that story. Getting, whether it's the bagel story, there's a million different things I'm sure you've seen and heard on the show where it's like, it ends up taking over the show. People are calling in and they don't want to talk about Patrick Mahomes. They want to talk about the how come they don't have tuna bagels anymore, or whatever it is. It's just, and it's fun. And then you just, sometimes you just throw out the rundown and go, this is what everyone wants to talk about, or share their stories about things that may at a drive-through window or whatever. And and Dan is cool like that. He's willing to say, all right, this is where we're going. It doesn't have to be 3 hours of golf, baseball, basketball, football, hockey, whatever it is. We can talk pop culture, and we can talk about personal stories that everyone could relate to. And we're not stand-up comics. It's not scripted. We're not trying out, although I get accused every once in a while that I'm trying out material when I start going on one of my rants. But we're having fun.
I mean, you did last week during Super Bowl week. You did a set.
Yeah, which was not planned. That was supposed to just be something I thought I was going to read from my desk. And next thing I know, Dan's like, why don't we give you a mic, and like, since you have a studio audience at the Fontainebleau, why don't you like do that shtick as if you're doing stand-up? Which again, that's what's so fun about the show. That was not a plan at all. So many things happen where, Dan's put one of us on the spot to do an impersonation of the actual guest that we have on the show, which he did to me years ago with Shannon Sharp, which is not a flattering impersonation, or different, or and Seaton's doing Tony Romo and things like that. And it's all in fun. We're not trying to insult anybody or hurt anybody's feelings, but there have been times where Dan all of a sudden asks us to do something, and that wasn't something that was discussed the day before in a pre-show meeting. It just kind of happened, and there you go. Let's just do it. Let's not take ourselves too seriously. And
nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.